All my life has been filled with people doubting me, telling me I couldn't do anything. From a very young age, just age 4 going into preschool, I never really saw myself as somebody different. I never really thought there was anything different about me from the other kids, but I was wrong. I walked into the school and I remember going, and first off I made a good friend. He's still my lifelong friend. And we got to playing, and another kid came up to play with us and he asked me to pass him a toy. And I went to pass it to him, and instantly he said, "Where's your hand?" I said, I don't know where my hand went." I said, "God just made me like this." But that never really came across to that kid, and he just continued to torment me and continued to make fun of me. And this continued on up until probably around kindergarten. And though I kept a tough exterior and I just continued to fight these kids and handle stuff with violence rather than my words, it didn't seem to affect me to them, but what they didn't see was what happened when I went home. Every night I'd go home and I'd cry myself to sleep, and my mom would read me scripture. So eventually, at a young age, I found myself that God had made me perfect, and that I was made perfectly in the image that He wanted me to be. And finally, I accepted myself at an early age that I was born perfect. And so as I got older and got into sports, I just found my passion. I absolutely love sports. I'm still around them today. I still play. And but going into sports, you'd hear the same thing every year. You're not good enough to play the next level. Whether it be going into middle school basketball or middle school baseball, which at one instance, a coach who had been calling me and calling my house and asking me when I was going to try out ended up cutting me from a baseball team. And I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why God had given me this gift and given me this confidence, yet no one would give me a chance. I didn't understand why when I go outside and I work my butt off and nothing paid off. Then around my 6th grade basketball season, we were shaking hands with our rival team, and a kid made a comment, "I don't want to touch that thing." And then the entire team didn't shake my hand. They shook my entire team's hand, but they wouldn't shake my hand. Now, as my teammates were my best friends, they were all furious. And a couple of them who were on the school baseball team actually basically beamed every kid on the other team just to send a message. But I still didn't understand what was wrong with me. But I knew I was going to prove everyone wrong. I knew that I was going to use their hate and all of their negativity, and I was going to turn around and turn it into fuel, and it was going to light my fire. And I knew that if I stood with God and I believed in Him, that I could do anything. Early on in high school, I came across the verse, Philippians 4:13. Now, that is probably the most overused verse out there, but it has so much meaning to me, because every time that I felt weak and every time that I felt like I could not stand it anymore, I felt somebody I could lean on, and that was God. Going into high school, I had a dream. My dream was to pitch at the collegiate level. And I had made the mistake of, at the time I felt like it was a mistake, I told my junior varsity coach, I said, "I'm going to pitch in college one day." He told me there's no way you could. He said, 1, you don't throw that hard. 2, you don't field that well. 3, there's not very many one-handed pitchers out there. Now, hearing that, most kids would probably be down and which I was, but I didn't let it affect my drive. I continued to power through and continued to grow with it and use it to fuel me and prove that coach wrong. Going into around my senior year, I had a couple schools looking at me for baseball, just little small schools, nothing like I was really interested in. I wanted a 4-year school. That was my goal, to get picked up by a 4-year collegiate baseball program. The summer before my senior year, I had an awesome chance. I got an email from a lady asking me, she runs a nonprofit out of Chesterfield, Missouri, called Camp No Limits, and she asked me to come be a sports counselor for these kids who were born like me, born missing legs, born missing hands. And they were kind of like a self-help camp, which is good. They were more so teaching kids how to button up shirts and how to tie your shoes and whatnot. And I guess they had heard about me through high school sports and everything. But I decided I was gonna go. I was gonna go and give this a shot. Something was pushing me towards it, and I could really feel it. And so I went to this camp, and I'm talking to these kids, and I'm asking them why they aren't playing sports. And the answer that I got just really puzzled me, because growing up I grew up in a Christian household, and I had such a supportive system through my parents who never discouraged me from anything. They always encouraged me to do anything that my heart desired. And so when seeing these kids who were being held back because their parents wouldn't let them even try, in fear that they were going to fail, it was heartbreaking. I mean, how can you not at least let them try? I mean, in order to find success, you have to fail. You build off your failures to succeed. So I just didn't understand. And so finally I got these kids alone, and I started running some sports drills with them, throwing them baseball, showing them how to do my glove transfer, and throwing them footballs and teaching them how to dribble a basketball and shoot. And I just saw raw athletic ability, raw talent, God-given talent. And I knew that these kids needed to see that and know that they can do anything. And so God placed an idea in my heart and said, you need to change this. Let's see what you can do. Let's see what we can do to fix this. And so I started a nonprofit called NubAbility Athletics. And the goal of this nonprofit is to bring kids who were born without their legs, without their hands, without their arms, or who were amputated, to teach them that they can be athletes, and to show them that they were created perfect, and that God always had a plan for them, and that no matter how they were created, it was perfectly. And so I started that, and it didn't really go anywhere my senior year. I was too focused on trying to get that baseball scholarship. But at the same time, I was getting into things that I didn't need to. I was falling into temptation that was unbelievable, and nothing that the guy who I had grown up would ever approve of. And the stuff I was doing was it just wasn't right. It was stepping away from God. And then I got that baseball scholarship that I wanted through Greenville College, and I felt the joy, and I felt God's presence again. And I felt like it was Him who did it, but yet I didn't really show Him the gratitude, and I didn't really give Him the glory. I was selfish. Going into my freshman year of college, I continued my same ways, continued to fall into temptation, and continued to let it control my life, and not really living for God, but living for myself. And in doing so, I got a wake-up call. The fall of my freshman year of college, I went to Game 6 of the World Series, the Cardinals versus the Rangers. And I'll never forget that because 2 days later, I was the weakest I'd ever been in my entire life. I remember waking up in my dorm room in Greenville in a cold sweat. I went to stand and I fell down. I went to stand back up and I couldn't hold myself up. Instantly I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what. So first thing I did was call my mom, because that's what any kid's gonna do. They're gonna call their parent. And so I called my mom and I told her, and she actually rushed down to Greenville, which is about an hour and 20 minutes from my house, and drove there and picked me up and brought me back home. The next morning I woke up at home. I wasn't feeling the best, but I wasn't feeling horrible. I could hold myself up. But the day after that I woke up and my dad had to carry me up the stairs. At the time I was a big 6'6", 225-pound right-handed pitcher who had gotten a lot bigger through college workouts and whatnot. And I could not lift my head up. I could not get off the couch. My dad had to come in and carry me up the stairs and into the car. I was so dehydrated and was so dizzy and weak that I felt like I was dying. So they took me to Carbondale Hospital, where I was treated there for about a week. But as we left Carbondale Hospital, that's when my life really began to change. My last night there, I experienced something that was unlike anything ever. It was these chills, these cold, violent chills that shook my body so hard. It shook me, and I just wanted it to stop. And it wouldn't. It was like I was caught in this just instant realm of just being shooken. And I couldn't talk. I couldn't feel like I was breathing that well. So first thing that came into my mind was say the Lord's Prayer. And so I started reciting the Lord's Prayer, and the cold, violent chills started to slowly go away. And then the next morning I was shipped off to St. Louis University Hospital, where I left with a diagnosis that will forever scare me, will forever wake me up in the middle of the night. I was diagnosed with something called Castleman's disease. Castleman's disease is a form of cancer that only 2 people in the United States are diagnosed with each year. The fatality rate is 100%. No one has survived it, and no one has lasted long after being diagnosed with it. So when I lay there and I get this news from this doctor, my entire world was flipped upside down. My parents were crying. My parents they looked up the definition of the disease and saw it, and I just saw incredible sadness in them. I knew they were still trying to stay strong for me, but it was just so hard, and I knew I had to stay strong for them. And hearing this, the first thoughts coming through my head are, I'll never be able to pitch in my first college baseball game. I'll never be able to play catch with my son. I'll never get to see how far NubAbility will go and how far my dream will go. And I'll never get to experience what it's like to be married and all the things I would never experience. And everything that I wanted to do just seemed like it wasn't ever going to happen. And so out of fear and just this feeling I got, I just grabbed my phone and I started messaging every single person that I felt like I had ever done wrong and asking for forgiveness. Not just forgiveness because I felt like I needed to ask for forgiveness. Forgiveness because I felt like I wasn't going to heaven if I wasn't forgiven for all these things I had done, for all these wrongs that I've made. And I felt like I don't know where I was going to go. I mean, here I was 3 years earlier, and I was a strong Christian boy who had God by his side all the time, relied on God for everything, and then now as a 19-year-old, I was pushing him away, and now my life was slipping away. And so I began to pray and ask God if he gives me one more chance, just one, I wouldn't let him down. That I would do everything in my power to give him the glory and to always show him my love for him, because I know he has shown me more love than I could ever imagine. And I knew growing up that our God was always been forgiving, and he is the most forgiving, and that he loves us no matter what we do. And in hearing that, whenever the preachers were reading me the Bible and stuff, I just knew, I got this sense of ease coming over me whenever I asked him to forgive me and asked him for a second chance. I just knew that it was granted. And the next morning I woke up and my liver numbers and stuff they were probably the worst they ever been. And I actually got text messages from my college teammates at the time and from former classmates saying they were praying for me. I probably got over 1,000 text messages with people telling me they were praying for me. My entire college had a visual over at our chapel building, and they said people were coming back to Christ praying for me, that people who had left were praying for me, and they came back. People I had never talked to at that school came up to me and gave me a hug. I mean, it was just crazy. And it was really crazy to think, here I was a week ago, weighing 225 pounds, 6'6", strong, fastest I've ever been, strongest I've ever been, throwing as hard as I ever could have. And then a week later, I'm on my deathbed. It didn't make sense at the time, but now it does. The next morning I woke up and our doctor walks in and he has a smile on his face. And I'm like, why are you smiling? Just kind of wondering, why is this man smiling? What brings him so joy to be in such a place like this? And he walks in and he says, you have mono. And I was like, how do I have mono? You tested me for mono twice. Said, it's come back negative both times. How do I have mono? And he said, you have mono. He said, all of our results before this pointed to this disease. But then in one night, you have mono. I knew that was God giving me another chance. And I knew why he was giving me another chance. He was giving me another chance to use my voice to show him to all these people and to go into the lives of all these kids who felt like they aren't perfect, that they're never going to be able to do things, and to show them that with him they can do everything. And that's where Philippians 4:13 comes in so strong in my life. Because without God, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. Without God, I don't know where I would be. And since I've come back to him, my life has been amazing. The foundation is thriving. I'm getting more and more kids every day. And they're coming from all over the world. And just to see these kids light up with such joy and learning that they were created perfect and accepting themselves as being created perfect, there's no greater joy in my life. It's the greatest thing in the world. And I couldn't do it without God. It's not me running that foundation. It's not me doing everything I'm doing. It's Him. And that's why my life is how it is. Because He allows me to live. He allowed me a second chance. And I'll never take it for granted. I still struggle with temptations today as just any other human. But I know He's by my side, and I know I can get through anything. I'm Sam Kuhnert, and that's why He is first.